Okay, so let's talk about the state of the franchise for the Detroit Lions. Now, the Detroit Lions finished this season 3-12-1. Now, obviously not the season that the Detroit Lions were hoping for. They finished in last place in the NFC North. But listen to what I'm about to say, right? Hypothetically, let's say if the Detroit Lions were fully healthy, and we were to take the Detroit Lions out of a very tough NFC North. We knew the NFC North was going to be the toughest division in all of football this year. Let's take the Detroit Lions out of the NFC North and put them in the NFC East or the NFC South, or if you want to change conferences, let's put them in the AFC South, right? And then ask yourself, how many wins in those divisions could the Detroit Lions have if they were fully healthy? Well, let's go through the possible scenarios, right? If we were to move the Detroit Lions from the NFC North into the AFC South with the Colts, the Texans, the Jaguars, and the Titans, the Detroit Lions would be a 9-win team in the AFC South, possibly 10 wins, right? Now, let's talk about if the Detroit Lions were in the NFC East with the Cowboys, the Redskins, the Giants, and the Philadelphia Eagles. So, the NFC East was one of the weakest divisions in all of football, right? So, we put the Detroit Lions in there, in the NFC East. I still think it's possible that the Detroit Lions could still be a 9-win team in the NFC East, given how weak the NFC East was this season. Philadelphia was banged up. Dallas was poorly coached. The Redskins and the Giants were putrid. So the Detroit Lions, you look at their record and you say 3-12-1, they suck, right? But don't just look at the record. Think about how talented this team is. Think about what this team could be if you were to take them out of this really tough NFC North and place them in another division. This would be a good team. This will possibly be a playoff team, right? So, the thing with the Detroit Lions is, it doesn't come down to talent. The Detroit Lions have talent. They suffered injuries this season, but they were more of a factor to being poorly coached by Matt Patricia this season than they were to having a lack of talent. Although they did suffer a couple of injuries, this Detroit Lions team is talented. So, if you're a Detroit Lions fan, you're asking JT, what positives can we take away from going 3-12-1 other than having the 3rd overall pick and the upcoming NFL draft? Well, a positive is that it's only up from here. The only way is up. If you're the Detroit Lions and you're a Detroit Lions fan, you have to look at it as the fact that you can't go any lower than what you are right now unless you go 2-14 or 1-15. In that case, if that happens, which I strongly doubt that will happen, Matt Patricia and Bob Cohen will be out of there, right? So if you're a Detroit Lions fan, the only way is up. You can't go any lower than what you were this season. So, what do Detroit Lions have to do to compete in a very tough NFC North? Because there's no running away. There's no switching conferences, or switching divisions. So, for Detroit to be competitive in this division, first thing they have to do is address the concerns that they have on defense. I think the Detroit Lions in the offseason, they need to get them another dominant one-on-one pass rusher. Now, they got Trey Flowers in free agency. Now, Trey Flowers started this past season really slow. Then he started to pick up steam in the latter half of the season. And he ended up finishing the season with, I believe he had 7.5 or 8.5 sacks. Can't really name the number on the top of my head. But Trey Flowers finished this season really productive, right? So if you're Detroit, you need to find another dominant one-on-one pass rusher that can complement Trey Flowers. So at first, I was thinking about Chase Young in the draft. But then I look at the past couple performances Chase Young has had. the Michigan game, the Big Ten championship game, and the college football playoff game. Now, given Chase Young was double teamed, I still would have liked to see Chase Young make a couple of more plays. So I still have a little bit of a doubt about how good Chase Young could be on NFL level, right? So Chase Young still might end up being a very good pro player. What are some alternatives before we go ahead and hype on the Chase Young hype train? Well, let's look at some potential free agents when it comes to pass rushers, right? So, Yannick Ngakoue, defensive end for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He could potentially be a free agent coming into this offseason if he doesn't get franchise tag or Jacksonville Jaguars don't strike a deal with him. If he hits the free agent market, I think the Detroit Lions most definitely have to give him the kitchen sink. Try to sign him. Maybe Shaquille Barrett and Tampa Bay don't strike a deal and Tampa doesn't hit him with the franchise tag, right? Now, that strongly probably won't happen, but maybe it does happen. Then you'll have to go after a guy like a Shaq Barrett. So, if you're Detroit, before you focus on the draft, because Detroit's in a win-now situation. And when you draft a player, most of the players that you're going to draft in the NFL draft, they're not going to have an immediate impact. Not a lot of rookies are really that good on the defensive side of the ball, unless you're like a once-in-a-generational type of talent, have a outstanding rookie season when they just carry your team to the playoffs. So if you're a Detroit Lions fan and you're expecting Chase Young to be good enough to have that good of an impact like a Nick Bosa, I think that's pretty much of an unrealistic expectation. I don't think it's a good defensive player at this year's draft that can have that good of an impact that can immediately turn around your franchise like that. Now, given there's players in here that can come in right away for the Detroit Lions and have good production right away, no player by himself as a rookie is going to be good enough to get the Detroit Lions to the playoffs. So, if you're the Detroit Lions in free agency, you got to try to get you a pass rusher. Maybe you look at a guy like a Vic Beasley, a guy who hasn't really quite worked out as well in Atlanta. Maybe you pick him up, give him a short-term deal, a 2-year contract. You bring him in, see what he can do under Matt Patricia, right? Because if you're the Detroit Lions, you're trying to win now. You got to take some risks, and you got to take some gambles. And when you look at how tough this division is, Detroit can't afford to take the conservative, we're just going to go ahead and try to get cheap players and try to fit them in, or we're just going to draft and try to develop our young talent. If you're Matt Patricia or you're Bob Quinn, you're running out of time. Both those guys are on a hot seat. Come next year, if the Detroit Lions are in the playoffs, we might be talking about the Detroit Lions, who they are looking at in their head coaching search and their general manager search, other than looking at what the Detroit Lions are going to be doing in the offseason, right? So if you're Matt Patricia and you're Bob Quinn, you got to get players in quickly, fast, in a hurry, guys who can produce right away, and that might come with taking some gambles. But at this point, your job is on the line. In the NFL, if you want to win, you got to take chances, you got to take gambles, right? So maybe you bring in a guy like a Vic Beasley, you bring him in, see what he can do, right? Then, the Detroit Lions also need to improve the secondary. Now, would that come at possibly trading away Darius Slay? Now, Darius Slay has been in a lot of rumors lately when it comes to him getting traded. There was a rumor that came out a couple of weeks ago that the Detroit Lions and the Denver Broncos potentially were engaged in the thought of swapping cornerbacks, Chris Harris Jr. for Darius Slay. If that's happened, I think Detroit would have won that trade because Chris Harris Jr. is a top 5 cornerback. He's one of the most underrated cornerbacks of the past decade in the NFL. Hasn't really allowed a lot of touchdowns since he got drafted, or he didn't even get drafted since he came into the league as an undrafted free agent out of Kansas. So that would be an upgrade from Darius Slay, in my opinion, right? So if you are Detroit, you're looking to trade Darius Slay, you're most likely going to end up swapping him from a draft pick and not a player and clearing up cap space, right? So you swap out Darius Slay, get a draft pick. Maybe you end up getting a very good cornerback in the second round. Maybe a guy like a Shaun Wade, who is a hybrid corner. He can play slot. He can also play safety as well. Then, if you're Detroit, you have to explore the options of who will potentially be available in free agency or in the draft when it comes to that safety position. So if you're Detroit, I think 2 big important positions that you need to address on the defense is the safety position and find the dominant one-on-one pass rusher who can produce. Then try to find some depth Try to find some players who aren't really good as starters, but can be potentially very good role players on the defensive line. Because a lot of Detroit Lions fans complain about how they got gas and how they had a lack of depth on the defensive line. So try to find you some good rotational pieces. So what Detroit needs to do on the offense side of the ball, I don't really think Detroit really has all they need to worry about on the offense side of the ball. I think the offense is pretty straight once Matthew Stafford comes back, which Matthew Stafford, if Detroit was a playoff caliber team and he was to stay fully healthy, he would have been in the MVP conversation. A lot of people call him trash, but if you go back and look at the stats, look at the performance that Matthew Stafford put up this season, he was a top 10 quarterback this season. So how do you keep Matthew Stafford healthy? Well, give him a running game, right? Now, the offensive line was pretty good when it came to protecting Matthew Stafford, but they weren't really good when it came to opening up holes for the halfbacks, right? So if you're Detroit, try to find you a good offensive tackle, offensive guard, and free agency in the draft. Probably free agency, because there's not really a lot of great offensive tackles and offensive linemen that I really like in this year's draft. So if you're Detroit, try to find you some good starting caliber offensive lineman. Now, you're not going to get a great offensive tackle. It's only a few good offensive tackles in the NFL, and they're all highly played. But you can find you a good enough offensive tackle, a good enough offensive guard that's good enough to give you some solid production. Because for some reason, Detroit Lions struggle to produce and open up holes for these halfbacks. And if you want to make it to the playoffs in this division, you're going to have some kind of a running game. Look at Detroit, look at Green Bay, and look at Minnesota. They're all in the playoffs, and they all relied on the rushing attack. So if you're Detroit, you got to be able to run the ball in this division if you want to be able to win. You can't rely on Matthew Stafford the whole entire season and be like, hey, take us to the playoffs, because in this division, the way it's set up, that's not going to be able to happen. So you got to be able to give them a run game. So the state of the franchise for the Detroit Lions, if you are a Detroit Lions fan, you should have a lot of optimism going into this offseason, because you got to come in with the mindset of, we were 3-12-1, disappointing season. But you got to come into the mindset of that the only way from here is up. We can't get no worse than what we already were this season. So that's the state of the franchise for the Detroit Lions. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content. And thanks for watching.